recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here and for your testimony here today. So in your testimony before the Appropriations Committee 2 weeks ago, you stated that the Department is diverting resources to help secure election infrastructure. Certainly, I applaud the focus on election infrastructure. Yet the budget request included a modest $7 million increase for the organization that carries out this analysis and support. And I certainly commend the Undersecretary designate Krebs for his prioritization of election assessments. But I worry that about the strain on NCAT's resources, especially since they are responsible for working with other areas of critical infrastructure, making them priority customers as well. So is the request sufficient to support important assessments in other areas of critical infrastructure sectors?
Thank you. Sir. So what we're doing is we're working, what we did receive in the omnibus was, I believe, 380 that went to EAC that we will, in conjunction with them, help state and locals prepare. We also have 26 million that went to NPPD. And we will continue to work with that. My comments on prioritization were simply that we all, and I know you share this, take this election very seriously. So in terms of processing vulnerability assessments, sending hunt teams, doing pen testing, providing clearances, we are prioritizing the election subsector. We will continue to work with our sector-specific agencies that also bring funding to the fight so that we can together have a holistic approach.
All right, so what data are you using to make sure that that NPPD has the resource it needs to respond to other areas of critical infrastructure so that it's not being ignored? Obviously, there's many attack vectors that they have to defend against, and how do we make sure that that those priority customers are not going to be ignored at the expense of the election, securing election equipment, which I certainly applaud the focus, particularly now on securing election infrastructure, but we also need to be focused on other areas of critical infrastructure.
Yes, sir. You have my commitment.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Neilsen, your budget request shifts more than $40 million in cyber research from the Science and Technology Directorate to NPPD. So I'm going to say up front that I'm very concerned about this proposal, and I'm skeptical about it. So what gives you confidence that NPPD, which has become primarily an operational organization, has the right tools and the people to take over this responsibility from S&T? Again, because this is an R&D function for the most part, which S&T would be the appropriate place to do this, are you worried that the high op tempo at NPPD will distract from the R&D work, or that the R&D work is going to take a back seat?
That's certainly not the intention, sir. Actually, it was to more closely align the needs of the critical infrastructure owners and operators in the 16 sectors to an R&D plan. So it was meant to make it more requirements-based. It's a priority to do so. As you know, the threat continues to evolve very, very quickly, and so we need to be continuing to do R&D as we operate, innovate as we go. And so that was the idea behind moving it to NPPD. But happy to work with you on how we make sure that that is used in the appropriate way.
Okay, I just want to be clear. I remain skeptical. This is something I'm going to stay very closely on top of to make sure that it doesn't become an afterthought or ignored. Secretary Neilsen, some of my colleagues have introduced legislation to start a bug bounty program at DHS. Some in your department have criticized the idea as being premature without robust vulnerability triage processes, and I certainly appreciate the concern. However, the newly revised NIST cybersecurity framework and other international standards point to having a vulnerability disclosure program, so with or without a bounty, as a best practice. And the Department of Defense and General Services Administration have both implemented successful policies. What in your mind would prevent DHS from having a vulnerability disclosure program that helps well-intended security researchers inform DHS about problems in its own systems?
So first of all, I agree that I think a bug bounty program is a very important tool. It's not a silver bullet, but nothing is. It's an important tool. We look forward to learning the lessons that DoD has learned in their own. We're watching the legislation that's going through Congress very closely, and we will prepare on our side to have the resources and planning that we need to then respond to what we find out through the bug bounty program.
But we sort of talk about two related but different things. yes, bug bounty program, but also a vulnerability disclosure vector, so that a program, so that when researchers find a vulnerability, they can report it to someone. Right now, there's nobody home. In other words, the security researchers don't have a way to contact DHS and make sure the DHS will then follow up on that program. So bug bounty program is good. I want to say is do that, but why don't you have a vulnerability disclosure program? The Department of Defense does, the General Services Administration does, DHS does not.
We do have a way in which they can contact us and actually receive calls very frequently within the NCIC or directly to U.S. CERT. We are formalizing the program.
U.S. CERT helps outside agencies. Okay, so if someone finds a vulnerability, for example, in a medical device, they would call U.S. CERT, and U.S. CERT can work to make sure that they're put in touch with the right person at the company to make sure we handle that vulnerability. The problem is that's not the case. The U.S. CERT does not do that for vulnerability disclosures within DHS.
No, they pass it to the correct people. I'm just suggesting the different ways that you can get into DHS to report things like that. But we are formalizing the program. It's very important. I don't disagree at all. We need to be able to not only notify victims, which we do in conjunction with FBI, but we need to, in an appropriate way, balancing it through the interagency process, disclose vulnerabilities.
Could you work with us to make sure that
Absolutely.
we develop this type of a vulnerability disclosure program at DHS? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. Last but not least, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Ratcliffe, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here today. I very much appreciate your testimony that you've given on all aspects of how DHS is prioritizing resources to accomplish the President's agenda for safety and security of the American people. As the chairman of the Cybersecurity Subcommittee, I want to focus my few minutes with you on this particular area. And I will start out by saying, with all due respect to your predecessors who've had considerable talents and abilities, I'm of the opinion that you have brought with you to this office a greater knowledge and appreciation, and are more steeped in cybersecurity than anyone before you. And I want to help you take advantage of that. I know we share the common goal of wanting to improve DHS's ability to impact the nation's cyber posture and defense. Because I know we also, I think, agree that cybersecurity poses one of our greatest national security threats right now.
Yes, sir.
So in the spirit of wanting to help you be successful, one of my priorities early in this term has been to invest